online. John, it looks as if you're ready to go.
Yeah, it looks like it. Are you seeing me advance through a couple slides?
Yes, amazing, absolutely.
All right.
Excellent. Okay, everybody, please do drop a welcome and applaud into the group chat for John. John, I will disappear now. So best of luck.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for your patience while I work that out. Glad to be with you today. I'm coming to you from Chicago in the U.S., where there's hardly anything of interest happening socially or politically, so we can all focus our attention 100% on the topic here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about design thinking in the enterprise. So I work at Walgreens, which, if folks aren't familiar, is, I believe, the second largest pharmacy in the U.S. And the team I lead here is working on service design, user experience design, and design research, all of which I'll get into a little bit in the presentation. So Walgreens was founded in 1901, which is very old by U.S. standards anyway, and was actually founded here in Chicago with one store, and that's the original Charles Walgreen on the left. And even though the company has been around for a long time, it's always had a history of innovation. So back in the 20s, Walgreens invented the malted milkshake. In the 50s, really brought in the concept of self-service to retail, whereas previously in pharmacies, almost everything was behind the counter and people had to be helped, personally. In the 80s, they took the big step of connecting all of the pharmacies together by satellite. And in the 90s, brought in something that was new at the time, but is now super ubiquitous, which is the concept of the drive-through pharmacy, which you'll see in many of our suburban locations in particular. Folks in the UK may be a little more familiar with Boots, and if you didn't know, Walgreens and Boots are now part of the same company, Walgreens Boots Alliance. We merged together back in, I believe, 2014 or so. So a lot of our synergies as a company have been worked on over the last few years. So as Walgreens grew throughout the U.S. and up to its current size of over 9,000 pharmacies, there was always a really huge focus on measuring convenience by miles and minutes. So that meant as we were building new pharmacies at a huge rate, the value was really considered to be in the closeness of these physical locations to all of the customers. And the stat that you see on the screen is one that we're fond of putting out there, which is that 78% of Americans live within 5 miles of a Walgreens store. And this image is actually just a map of Walgreens stores just in part of Chicago where I live. But where I came into the company about 10 years ago was really to help the company move toward digital by starting a user experience practice and working with what we then called our e-commerce team to really bring digital to the forefront. And as a designer and very much customer experience person myself, I feel that the digital practice was very much user-centered from the very beginning. So we always were really into prototyping and doing usability testing with work that we were developing, A/B testing and real-time feedback. So when you're in digital on a web or an app, it's relatively quick to be able to try different things and get that sort of immediate customer feedback. And that approach helped us to develop a lot of great digital solutions for our customers in all three areas of our business. So in the pharmacy, things like refill by scan that made refilling prescriptions very easy. In the retail space, things like digital coupons and looking at store inventory in the local markets, and then in the photo business, really allowing our customers to very easily kind of reinvent what photo meant by easily taking images from their mobile devices and creating prints and calendars and Christmas cards and all these things that we do in the store. However, what happened, and I think that happens in a lot of large companies, is that we did develop some silos between the physical stores, which had always been kind of our legacy, and the digital functions, which were much newer, and really attempted to reinvent convenience for our customers. And the reason that that's especially critical for us to face these silos is that for Walgreens in particular, our customer journey usually ends at the store. So think about something like refilling prescriptions in the app, the vast majority of our customers still come to the store to pick up those prescriptions. Or even on the retail side, where we do have a fairly strong kind of direct-to-consumer e-commerce offering, we still have more customers using our retail functions to do things like check inventory in their local store, or create a pickup order at their local store, or do things like clip a digital coupon that they're going to use later on when they shop physically in the store. So, this sort of stock photo here really kind of represents a utopia in the store of lots of personal attention and a clean store and a lot of smiling people. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's more something like this, where we have many people waiting in line without enough capacity to get them through quickly, or kind of the other thing, which is a customer looking for help, in this case waiting at our photo counter and not being helped right away and not having a great experience. And I came across this a while back, which really kind of resonated. Daniel Kahneman has developed something called the peak end rule. As you can read here, people judge an experience largely based on how they felt at its peak, and that means sort of the most positive or most negative part of that experience, and at its end. So what happens at the end of that experience tends to stick in folks' mind a lot more than kind of averaging out the whole experience. So how do we approach this divide, and how do we try to bring some of that very user-centered perspective that we're very familiar with in digital? How do we take those things and bring them out into the enterprise, into the omni-channel enterprise at large? So what I'm going to just go through here relatively quickly are 5 design thinking fundamentals that we've been trying to evangelize in the company, and how those can help us meet our customers' needs better. So the first one is that we build empathy by talking to actual customers. And you'll see parenthetically, I put and team members here, and you can almost mentally, every time I say customers, say and team members to yourself, because our team members are a very critical stakeholder for us as well. And I think we all know that an engaged and satisfied team member passes that on to the customer. So keep that in mind. And we do have, I think, 250,000 store team members. So it's a pretty important stakeholder group to think about. So building empathy, how do we do that? Well, part of our practice that I lead is what we call our design research practice. And this is a group of researchers whose sole focus is to get close to our customers and make sure that we're meeting their needs. So from left to right, we do this in many ways. Sometimes we're in a customer's home, understanding how they use digital or any other of their sort of self-serve tools. In the middle, we're in stores a lot of times, talking to customers and understanding how they shop and in the physical environment. On the far right, we're sometimes behind the counter in the pharmacy or in the store, working again with the team members to understand how their experience matches up with the customer. So when we talk about design research, we really think about it in 2 different buckets. The first, which I was really referencing just now about building empathy, is what we call generative research. Sometimes we call this discovery research. But the point of that is to make sure that we are making the right thing. And by that, we mean we are creating the correct solution, or the correct kind of solution for the customer or team member's needs. And I'll get back to the other side of this screen in just a minute. So when we talk about research, often people like to bring up this quote, which is not clear if Henry Ford actually said this or not. But this quote that's attributed to him all the time is, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And in my experience, people bring this up usually when they're just trying to get out of budgeting research. But besides that, I think it's really not a accurate portrayal of what we're talking about in design research, because when we meet with those customers and hear them and understand their lives and their pain points, what we're really looking for is unmet needs. So we work with customers to understand where they're having trouble or where they're hitting barriers, and then we can use our own creativity and skills to then go solution against those. All right. So number 2 is that we map the journey end to end and try to find areas where we can make a difference. So what do we mean by that? So this is a customer journey map, and I know you can't really read it, and that's okay because I'm going to walk through it really quickly. But the point of a customer journey map is that through actual observation, conversation, we can make sure that we understand the journey that the customer is currently going through in a specific part of our business. So something like refilling a prescription or printing a photo book, these are all things that our customers do. So there are a bunch of elements to customer journey maps, and there are a million different ways to show these. But for us, across the top, we're typically showing kind of the linear path that the customer or team member goes through. We're understanding all of the things that the customer does, as well as the team members. Again, that theme keeps coming up. We're making sure that we talk about all the different touch points that they may intersect with. So for us, it's things like stores and digital properties and the phone and all kinds of different touch points. And then maybe most importantly, at the bottom of this format, are pain points or service gaps. So again, these are where we've just clearly documented through actual hands-on insights and research what pain points or barriers those customers and team members are experiencing. I think I mentioned service design at the beginning, and the folks on our team that do a lot of this work, in addition to our researchers, are our service designers. There are, of course, lots of different definitions of service design. This is the one I kind of like, but it's really about trying to make the quality of that experience consistent over time and across multi-channel touch points. And the reason I highlighted the multi-channel piece is that for a company like ours, and I'm sure a lot of the companies out there, there's a digital division, there's a marketing division, there's a store operations division. There are all these groups that have sort of sprung up for different reasons organizationally. But our customers, what we know about our customers is they don't think about it that way or care about it. They really think about us as Walgreens and their experiences with Walgreens, whether it's on the phone, in the app, in the store, or what have you. So we really need to think about it in that way, in one cohesive experience. And, I talked about all the different touch points. We have many of them for us. And I kind of previewed this a minute ago, but we have our stores and our products. We have our team members. We have our loyalty program, which has, I believe, over 100 million members, our digital and our social and marketing. So it really spans the whole gamut of physical and digital. And then as well, we talk a lot about, as service designers, front stage and backstage. So front stage is what we're typically used to looking at, which is all of the things that the customer sees and experiences. And again, that backstage is important as well, which are what are the operations and the team member functions and interactions that actually end up showing up in the front stage ultimately, so that customer experience is at least in large part driven by what happens behind the scenes. So here's a quick little sort of silly story about that whole front stage, backstage concept. I saw this vending machine in a mall somewhere, and decided I would stop and grab myself a Diet Coke, which I drink too many of, unfortunately. And this is one of these vending machines you've seen, which has sort of a robotic arm and things like that. So it's relatively high tech, as vending machines go. So I came up and swiped my card, I believe, and then I started taking a closer look at which product I wanted to get. And this is what I saw. So if you take a look at the circled area, you'll see that whoever had stocked this machine wasn't really paying attention and put two different kinds of products into slots that had the same label. So now as the customer, I've been impacted, and granted not in a super severe way, but I've been impacted by that backstage lack of attention. And now the vending machine has essentially become a slot machine, because if I punch in B4, I'm not really sure what product I'm going to get. And of course I got the wrong one, but I survived that and moved on. But just a little story about the importance of the backstage functions. Okay. Moving on to number 3. We fall in love with the problem, not a solution. So what does that mean? It means that before we're going to start converging on answers to problems, we want to make sure that we're doing as broad an ideation as we can. I know that we've probably all been in a situation where, and I'll make one up. Hey, Amazon has these awesome Amazon Go stores where you can walk in and just grab anything off the shelf and leave. We need to make that for ourselves, or insert any other innovation or solution that lives out there. So what we're really trying to push is, let's not jump to a solution right away before we make sure that we are considering many solutions and making sure we're landing on the right one or many solutions. So in terms of design thinking, and by the way, I did not invent this, but we talk about it all the time. We really explain this in terms of this concept called the double diamond. And you can see two diamonds on the screen. The first diamond is what we think of as the challenges or the pain points or the barriers. And what we're trying to do on kind of the upslope of this diamond, where it says divergent, is that to make sure that we're discovering and documenting all the pain points. So we talked about that already. We talked about building a journey map, understanding all those pain points. And then the next step for us is to prioritize those pain points. So of all of those barriers, problems, et cetera, we usually can't solve any of them, but what are the ones that are the most important to address first? And there are lots of ways that we can prioritize those by things like severity and frequency and that kind of thing. But then in terms of ideation, the second diamond is the diamond of solutions. So again, we're going to get very divergent, meaning we're going to try to propose as many candidate solutions. And we use the word candidate very specifically to mean that these are potential solutions or solutions that we think may work. And then we go through a convergent process or a narrowing down process to choose the best solutions that we want to go explore. Okay, so this is really kind of if I had to show one slide, this would kind of be it, because it's pretty simple, but it's often not followed. And we think this type of approach can be used to solve almost any problem. So how do we, when we talk about the solution side, so the right side of the diamonds, we often do a lot of structured ideation activities. So, our previous speaker talked about aspirologies, and I hope these are not aspirologies, but we do believe in group ideation activities in order to develop lots of potential ideas for something. And it's not a very loose kind of everybody get in a room and start shouting things out. But there are guidelines and processes that we follow that we won't get into too much depth. But there are some sort of fairly universal kind of guidelines about these that we try to follow. So we think it's important to have a diverse group. We want people from different walks of life and different races and ethnicities and ages and things like that, and technical capabilities, so that our ideation is not coming all from the same perspective. We try to throw out all titles and hierarchy. So while we may include very senior execs in our solutioning activities, if they're interested, they're treated just the same as everybody else. We do think that conflicting ideas are a positive, because often that kind of debate of ideas can come up with something even better. And on that note, we also expect anyone's idea to not be tightly held by them, but rather that we could remix and riff on that idea, because again, it may start out as a germ of something and then turn into something different, which is better. And then finally, good solutioning or ideation activities require a willingness to say stupid things, which means to us that, if I've got just like a crazy idea, I should feel comfortable putting it out there, even if I'm 100% confident we can never do it, because again, it may spur something else that is actually feasible and can turn into something great. Okay. So as we're developing lots of ideas through our structured processes, eventually we have a whole bunch of ideas or candidate solutions, and we need to figure out how to decide which ones are best, so meaning which ones we should go after first. And what we like to do is use this sort of 3-axis model to evaluate those. And the details aren't terribly important, but the 3 axes are desirability, viability, and feasibility. So desirability is really all about the value to the customer. So how delightful is it? How much does it improve the customer's life? How easy is it? How usable? How easy to adopt? Viability is the value to the business. So can we make money on this? Can we save money through this? Does it increase our brand? And then finally, feasibility, which is about how difficult or easy is this thing to create. That's very often technical feasibility, but there are other kinds of feasibility as well. Like, for example, is it legal, or is it possible to scale across 9,000 stores or whatever the case might be? So by using a model like this, we can begin to try to take all of those ideas that in our very divergent part of the process and start to converge on the ones that we think are best to kind of go after first. All right. Number 4, we design experiments and build prototypes for our best ideas. And then we test them with real people. So what's a prototype? We use the term prototype extremely loosely on purpose. So I stumbled across this in our office where our designers were working on a concept and they just need something to represent a physical computer that you'd find in our store. And this is a prototype. Honestly, it took 2 seconds, but it actually served a purpose. And so if you remember before, we were talking about design research, the 2 buckets. We talked about generative research and that really addressing, are we making the right thing? In this part of the process, we're really talking about, are we making the thing right? So we begin to do evaluative research, also sometimes called validation research. That's all about, we're starting to design something and we need to figure out if it's being done in the right way to meet the needs of our customers or team members. So sometimes these prototypes are extremely low tech. So in this case, we had some different concepts for our pharmacy drive-through that we were thinking about. And we just simply brought in sketches and storyboards. And in this case, our pharmacy technician was looking at it and giving us feedback. And we had a few concepts, and it was a very broad idea. So we were just getting very generalized feedback from the store staff about these concepts. In this case, we had some checkout concepts we were trying to evaluate. So we got in the store and we actually built these things out of aluminum foil and an iPad and cardboard boxes. Again, a very low tech option, but it allowed us to get the right kind of feedback at the right time very quickly to make sure that we were going off in the right direction. Then as our process continues and evolves, prototypes might be something like wireframes. So we've probably all seen something like this. This was a few years back on one of our mobile app redesigns. Now we're starting to get into a prototype that actually kind of looks like the final product, but it's still been done in a very quick and relatively low fidelity way, so that we have not technically built anything yet, but we're creating a clickable prototype that we can use with customers to understand if the flow that we're creating in the app is working for them. And then finally, a prototype might be extremely high fidelity compared to the actual thing it will eventually replace. In this case, we were working on some concepts for the point of sale system in the stores, and I think you can probably see the keypad down there at the bottom. But rather than the effort and resources we needed to actually put these new designs onto the point of sale systems in the store, we simply put them on an iPad mini, which very much resembled what the pin pad would look like. Again, so we could test the usability and interactions here. Then once we validated that, then go into the effort of actually building it for the point of sale system. So the point of all of this is that as we create higher fidelity prototypes, we're trying to gather more and more refined insights. So when our prototype is very loose, like a sketch, the feedback that we're getting or the insights that we're getting are very broadly about the concept. All the way to the right, when we are down to the level where a prototype is almost indistinguishable from the final product, we're getting very specific feedback about things like labeling and how buttons work and what the flow will be in that interaction. So I showed you a minute ago a picture from inside the store, and I hope this video is coming through okay, and you'll kind of see us slowly walking around the store. And what you'll see here in a second is that the store is actually a prototype itself. So even though you see everything on the shelves and it's all very much built out, this store is part of our innovation center, which is actually 3 full-size Walgreens stores that are built out inside a warehouse, essentially. So it's not open to the public, but the company uses it to test lots of things, including the fixtures and how we do displays for different times of the year. But it's a great resource for us as designers because we can create experiences or prototype experiences in this environment, and we can bring customers in to test it without actually disrupting the operations of a real store and people shopping there. Okay, so 5 and 5th and last concept, we consider deployment or launch an opportunity to learn more, not the end of our work. So another quick story to go with this example. Years ago, we had a service called Web Pickup, which would allow customers to create an order online and pick it up in the store the same day. In fact, little plug, we actually just relaunched this service this week throughout the US. But when we launched it a few years ago, there was a little unit like you see here that sat on the photo counter in our store. And there used to be, right in the middle where you see that black rectangle, a button, like a bright green or bright yellow button. Excuse me. So the idea was that if a customer came up to the counter and wanted to claim their web pickup order, they would press that button, and then it would announce over the PA system that a customer was here to pick up their order. But when we were in the store doing some research, we saw that the button was gone, and we asked the store team what happened to the button. And the team member very honestly said, well, customers kept pushing it, so we took it out. And we thought, whoa, that's some real feedback there. But maybe not the best solution to what the problem was. And what we learned through a little more digging and conversation is that while this button had really been designed specifically for web pickup, which would be a handful of orders a day, once the button was out there, anyone who needed any kind of help at all in the store would push the button, triggering the PA system to announce that they needed help. So, it's the kind of situation where somebody very well-meaning created this concept, but until we got it into the live environment, it would have been pretty difficult to predict how it might have been used. So being able to pivot post-launch or post-pilot is critically important, so that as you see something, how something works in real life, it's important to be able to pivot. This was another quick example. This actually was earlier this year. We were testing some different self-checkout concepts in the store, and in this case, it only accepted debit and credit cards and Apple Pay and things like that. So no cash, just electronic payments. And there were a bunch of different places we said that. Yet, as we let customers just try to experience this, and we sort of observed from a few feet away, a number of customers tried to put cash into this unit right here, which is actually a receipt printer. It's not something that inputs cash at all. But we found out a valuable lesson, which was that, first of all, people often don't read the things that we think they should, but they are also very much informed by the experiences they've had elsewhere. So lots of stores with self-checkout have some sort of way to input cash, and customers were expecting that. So the theme of these stories is really that until you put something out there in the wild, you don't always know how it's going to be used. So that research up front is really critical. And this is an amazing and fun example of that, is that someone clearly put a lot of effort and expense into this beautiful slide. And these kids really, they don't care. They're not using it that way, and they're having fun in their own method. All right, so just to wrap up, when we talk about design thinking internally, I think a lot of the impact and the value of it is, I hope, self-explanatory. But I found this article from last year from Forrester, the ROI of design thinking, which I definitely encourage people to read. I think it's great. But there are a couple excerpts that I grabbed from it. And there are a lot of what I would call kind of business advantages to this kind of design thinking approach, which you can see here. And just a couple that I want to highlight. One is this idea of reducing risk. And for us, when we talk about this, what we mean is that if you do the research and go through the process of validating the work that you're doing in protected environments and kind of iterate and gradually build up that confidence, once you launch something out into the stores or even in digital, the risk of it failing is much lower because we have done our homework to understand as much as we can how that'll be adopted by our customers. The second is that we're trying to reduce employee and user labor. So on the employee side, it's an often overlooked area, but the tools and the processes that we give our employees to use should also be researched and developed through the designer lens or the design thinking lens, because again, that's a huge stakeholder group for us, and creating engaged and satisfied employees who don't mind using the tools that we give them is going to translate into the customer, and also things like keeping employees around longer, we hope. And then finally, what we're really working on is this idea of transforming culture. So again, Walgreens is a very old company and has lots of legacy ways of working. So we were trying to bring some of these design thinking concepts to a company who has ways of doing things that have worked very well, but we think can be even better through these lenses. So that's all I had to say. I appreciate everybody's attention. I'm easy to get a hold of. You can find me on LinkedIn, or my email address is here if you want to reach out. But otherwise, thank you for having me, and it's been really good talking to you.
Amazing, John. Thank you so much. It was great to see. Very interesting to see the 3 prototype stores there as well. It must be quite a fun place to experiment in. So congratulations there. And amazing talking, some amazing insights. So thank you so much. Everybody, please let John know what you thought in the chat room. Rounds of applause and thank you would be appreciated, please. John, if you'd like to disappear into the background once more, and we will welcome our next speaker today. So thank you once again, John.